Silence becomes dangerous when a narcissist realizes the truth can no longer be hidden. Not during the yelling, not during the cold behavior, but during the exact moment they understand they've been exposed. That is when the real psychological game begins. Because a narcissist who knows they are guilty rarely reacts the way normal people do. Most people expect honesty after exposure. They expect guilt, regret, accountability. But narcissists often respond in ways that leave people emotionally destroyed, mentally confused, and questioning their own reality. And the terrifying part is that many of these reactions are not random. They are calculated survival mechanisms designed to protect the narcissist's image at all costs. The mask starts slipping, panic starts building underneath their calm exterior, and suddenly the person you thought you knew begins acting completely different. Some become cold and emotionless overnight, some become aggressive, some play the victim so convincingly that even innocent people start doubting themselves. Others apologize in ways that sound sincere on the surface while secretly manipulating the situation underneath. And most people never realize what is actually happening until the emotional damage is already done. What makes this even darker is that narcissists often reveal their true personality more clearly after they are caught than before. Their reactions expose the hidden psychology they work so hard to protect. In many cases, the guilt itself is not the problem for them. The real problem is losing control, losing admiration, losing power, and losing the version of themselves they desperately want others to believe. That is why conversations with narcissists can suddenly feel twisted, exhausting, and emotionally draining. Facts stop mattering. Logic disappears. The entire situation becomes about protecting their ego. And once you understand these psychological patterns, you start seeing behaviors that most people completely miss. You start understanding why narcissists deny obvious truths even when evidence is right in front of them. You start understanding why they attack people who expose them instead of fixing the damage they caused. And most importantly, you begin understanding why victims often leave these relationships feeling confused instead of validated. In this video, we are going to break down the disturbing things narcissists do when they know they're guilty, including the hidden manipulation tactics that psychologists rarely explain in simple language. We'll uncover why narcissists rewrite reality, why fake remorse can be more dangerous than open anger, and why the moment they lose control over you is often the moment their real personality fully appears. Some of these behaviors are so subtle that many people never recognize them until years later. Others are so emotionally intense that they leave permanent scars on a person's confidence and sense of reality. By the end of this video, you will understand the psychological reason behind these shocking reactions and why narcissists become even more manipulative after exposure instead of becoming honest. And if you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling mentally exhausted, emotionally blamed, or strangely guilty for telling the truth, this video may explain more than you expected. Welcome to the Silent Empath. If you enjoy deep psychological insights and powerful truths about human behavior, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and stay with us until the end because the final revelation changes the way most people see narcissistic guilt forever. At the center of narcissistic behavior sits a fragile identity that depends on illusion more than reality. Most narcissists spend years building a version of themselves that looks confident, intelligent, innocent, powerful, or morally superior. That image becomes their emotional protection. It becomes the mask they use to control how other people see them. And over time, many narcissists become deeply attached to that false identity because underneath the arrogance often exists insecurity they cannot tolerate facing directly. This is why accountability feels so threatening to them. A healthy person may feel embarrassed after being exposed, but a narcissist often experiences exposure as psychological danger. Being caught lying, manipulating, cheating, or hurting someone forces them too close to emotions they desperately avoid, especially shame. And shame affects narcissists differently because it attacks the identity they worked so hard to protect. In their mind, admitting guilt can feel like admitting weakness, failure, inferiority, or loss of control. That is why many narcissists react with defense instead of reflection. The goal immediately shifts away from honesty and moves towards self-protection. And this reaction is often so automatic that they may not even fully realize how manipulative they are becoming in the moment. Their brain starts searching for escape routes before accountability can fully reach them. This is why some narcissists can lie with shocking confidence even while knowing the truth has already been exposed. The false image matters more to them than the reality itself. And once you understand this, their behavior starts making much more sense, because the first thing many narcissists do after being caught is deny everything, even when the evidence is obvious, even when text messages exist, even when witnesses are involved, even when they know the other person already knows the truth. They may deny conversations that clearly happened. They may twist details into completely different stories. They may confidently claim certain events never occurred at all. And the disturbing part is that they often do this with such certainty that victims begin doubting their own memory. A normal disagreement slowly turns into psychological confusion. The victim walks into the conversation looking for clarity but leaves wondering if they misunderstood the entire situation. This is exactly how reality distortion begins. Narcissists know that confusion weakens confidence. The more uncertain you become, the easier it becomes for them to avoid accountability. Because if they can make you question your own perception, they no longer have to fully defend their behavior. And again, the deeper reason behind this denial is shame avoidance. Accepting reality would force them to confront the possibility that they are not the person they pretend to be. For many narcissists, that emotional discomfort feels unbearable. So instead of processing guilt in a healthy way, they reject reality itself. But denial rarely stays calm for long, because once narcissists realize the truth is not disappearing, many of them become aggressive toward the person exposing them. The energy of the conversation suddenly changes. What started as a calm discussion becomes emotionally intense almost without warning. Their tone hardens, their voice becomes sharper. Small concerns suddenly trigger explosive reactions. Insults appear, mocking begins, old mistakes get dragged into the conversation. Sometimes the attack becomes subtle and psychological. Other times it becomes openly cruel. The purpose behind this reaction is not random anger, it is emotional redirection. If they can make you feel guilty, emotional, unstable, or defensive, attention shifts away from what they actually did. The focus moves from their behavior to your reaction. This is why narcissists often attack the character of the person confronting them instead of addressing the issue itself. They may call you dramatic, sensitive, insecure, crazy, selfish, or controlling. They may accuse you of starting problems or destroying the relationship, and many victims do not realize that this emotional chaos is intentional. Calm conversations become confusing arguments because confusion helps narcissists regain control. If they can destroy your confidence in the moment, they do not have to sit with accountability. And this is why people dealing with narcissists often leave serious conversations feeling emotionally exhausted instead of emotionally resolved. One of the most emotionally confusing things narcissists do after hurting someone is suddenly acting like they are the victim. The conversation can begin with clear facts, clear pain, and clear accountability, but within minutes the entire emotional direction changes. Instead of discussing what they did, you suddenly find yourself defending your tone, your emotions, your reaction, or even your character. This shift happens so smoothly that many people do not realize they are being psychologically manipulated while it is happening. A narcissist may say things like, "You're attacking me," or "You're too sensitive," even after doing something deeply hurtful. They may act emotionally wounded because you confronted them. They may bring up their stress, their childhood, their sacrifices, or all the things they claim they've done for you, and slowly the conversation stops being about the damage they caused and becomes centered around their emotional discomfort instead. This tactic is powerful because it creates guilt inside the victim. The person who was hurt suddenly feels cruel for speaking up. Many victims begin softening their words, apologizing for their emotions, or completely abandoning the original issue just to calm the situation down. That is exactly what the narcissist wants. Emotional control gets restored the moment attention shifts away from their behavior, and many narcissists are highly skilled at creating this reversal because protecting their ego matters more to them than resolving the actual problem. This is why some people walk into serious conversations determined to stand up for themselves but leave feeling guilty for even bringing up the issue at all. The narcissist may start acting overwhelmed, misunderstood, exhausted, emotionally broken, or unfairly judged. Sometimes they even cry, withdraw, or accuse the other person of emotional abuse simply because accountability entered the conversation. And this creates enormous psychological confusion because the victim starts wondering whether they were too harsh, instead of focusing on the original betrayal. This tactic becomes even stronger when the narcissist mixes victimhood with emotional guilt. They may say things like, "After everything I've done for you," or "Nobody appreciates me," or "You only focus on my mistakes." The goal is not honest communication. The goal is emotional redirection. The narcissist needs the emotional spotlight moved away from their actions and back onto their pain because their pain feels safer to discuss than their accountability. And over time, many victims become trapped inside this cycle where every confrontation somehow ends with them comforting the person who hurt them. The emotional damage from this becomes very deep because people slowly lose confidence in their own right to feel upset. They stop trusting their instincts, they stop expressing pain clearly. They begin over-explaining themselves just to avoid triggering another emotional reversal. And once this pattern becomes normal inside a relationship, the narcissist gains even more power because the victim starts censoring themselves automatically. But this manipulation often grows darker through something even more psychologically damaging: gaslighting and reality distortion. When guilt becomes too uncomfortable for a narcissist, many of them begin reshaping reality itself. Facts become flexible, timelines change, conversations get rewritten, emotional reactions become the new focus instead of actual behavior. And slowly the victim becomes mentally exhausted trying to hold on to the truth. Gaslighting is not always dramatic in the beginning. Sometimes it starts with small denials or subtle contradictions. A narcissist may claim they never said something that was clearly said. They may insist a conversation happened differently. They may accuse the other person of misunderstanding simple facts. And at first, the victim may only feel slightly confused. But over time, the confusion becomes psychological instability. Because when someone repeatedly denies your reality with complete confidence, your brain naturally begins questioning itself. That is exactly why gaslighting is so dangerous. It attacks perception itself. The victim stops focusing on the harmful behavior and starts focusing on proving they are not crazy. This mental shift is extremely important because once the victim enters a defensive mental state, the narcissist regains emotional control. Instead of explaining their lies, they now watch the other person desperately defend their own memory. And narcissists often intensify this behavior when they feel exposed. They may twist timelines to make themselves look innocent. They may remove important details from stories. They may exaggerate your reactions while minimizing their own actions. They may even act calm and confused while you become emotional, making you appear unstable in comparison. This creates a psychological imbalance where the victim starts looking irrational simply because they are reacting emotionally to repeated manipulation. Some narcissists become experts at this process because they understand emotionally that confusion weakens resistance. A confused person becomes easier to control. A confused person starts needing validation. A confused person loses trust in their instincts. And once self-trust disappears, dependency increases. This is why many people trapped in narcissistic relationships describe feeling mentally foggy, emotionally drained, and disconnected from their own judgment. They spend so much energy trying to explain reality that they lose touch with their confidence entirely. The terrifying part is that narcissists often maintain this distortion for long periods of time without breaking character. They may look calm while denying obvious truths. They may appear logical while twisting reality. And because many narcissists care deeply about image management, they often become extremely convincing to outsiders. Friends, family members, or even therapists may struggle to see the manipulation because narcissists present themselves differently depending on who is watching. This creates another layer of isolation for victims because not only are they doubting themselves, but sometimes the people around them doubt them too. And inside this confusion, many victims start desperately searching for one thing from the narcissist: genuine remorse. They hope for honesty. They hope for emotional understanding. They hope the narcissist will finally admit the damage they caused. And sometimes narcissists do apologize. But many of these apologies are not driven by empathy. They are driven by strategy. A narcissist may apologize to stop consequences. They may apologize to prevent abandonment. They may apologize to repair their image. Or they may apologize simply because their control over the situation feels threatened. This is why narcissistic apologies often feel emotionally incomplete even when the words sound correct. The apology may contain just enough emotion to calm the situation, but not enough accountability to create real change. They may say, "I already said sorry," in a frustrated tone, as if the problem should instantly disappear after minimal effort. They may say, "Nobody's perfect," to reduce the seriousness of their actions. They may say, "Can't you let it go?" because your continued pain makes them uncomfortable. The focus again shifts away from your healing and back toward their emotional convenience. Real accountability requires empathy. It requires sitting with another person's pain without immediately becoming defensive. It requires emotional honesty. And many narcissists struggle deeply with these things because empathy threatens the self-centered emotional structure they depend on. This is why some apologies from narcissists feel performative rather than sincere. The words exist, but the emotional depth behind them feels missing. Some narcissists even study emotional language carefully so they can appear remorseful without truly confronting their behavior. They learn what people want to hear, they learn what temporarily repairs trust, but underneath the apology, the core patterns often remain unchanged because the goal was never transformation. The goal was regaining emotional access and restoring control. This creates painful confusion for victims because the apology briefly restores hope. For a moment, it feels like the narcissist finally understands. For a moment, the relationship seems fixable again. But eventually the same manipulation returns because the underlying psychology was never addressed. And this cycle can repeat many times. Hurt, denial, emotional chaos, temporary apology, brief calm, then more manipulation. Many victims stay trapped inside this emotional loop for years because every small moment of remorse feels like proof that the narcissist can change. But sometimes the narcissist's behavior becomes even more revealing when they realize their control is truly disappearing. This is often the most dangerous stage emotionally because narcissists react very differently once they sense they are losing influence over someone. A person who once accepted manipulation starts setting boundaries. A person who once chased explanations stops arguing. A person who once begged for honesty begins emotionally disconnecting. And narcissists often feel this shift before it is openly spoken. They sense the loss of emotional control, and that realization can trigger extreme reactions. Some narcissists suddenly become cold and emotionally distant. They withdraw affection. They stop communicating normally. They act as though the relationship never mattered. This emotional shutdown is sometimes called discarding, and it often shocks victims because the narcissist appears emotionally detached almost overnight. But underneath that coldness is usually wounded ego and loss of control. Other narcissists react in the opposite way. Instead of withdrawing, they suddenly become incredibly kind, affectionate, attentive, and emotionally intense. They start complimenting more, promising change, acting vulnerable, showing affection they previously withheld. This behavior is often called love bombing, and it happens because the narcissist senses emotional distance growing. Their kindness is not always about connection. Sometimes it is about pulling the person back into emotional dependency before they fully escape. This is why victims often feel confused during separation attempts. The narcissist who ignored their pain for months suddenly becomes emotionally available the moment they try leaving. But once emotional control returns, the unhealthy patterns usually return too. Some narcissists also begin damaging the other person's reputation once they lose control. They spread distorted stories. They portray themselves as victims to mutual friends or family members. They quietly attack the other person's credibility behind the scenes. This behavior is deeply revealing because it shows how strongly narcissists depend on protecting image. If they cannot control the person directly anymore, they may try controlling how others see that person instead. And for victims, this stage becomes emotionally devastating because they are not only healing from manipulation but also defending themselves against false narratives. The narcissist's behavior changes depending on what restores power fastest. Sometimes that means affection, sometimes silence, sometimes anger, sometimes emotional guilt. But underneath all these reactions sits one core emotional truth. Control feels safer to many narcissists than vulnerability. Vulnerability requires honesty, emotional exposure, empathy, and self-reflection. Control avoids all of those things. And this is why healthy communication often feels impossible with narcissists during moments of guilt. The conversation may appear to be about truth, but emotionally the narcissist is fighting for psychological survival. That leads to one of the biggest truths most people miss about narcissistic behavior. Deep down, many narcissists know far more than they openly admit. They may deny reality verbally. They may rationalize harmful actions. They may twist stories and distort events. But their reactions often reveal awareness underneath the surface. The intensity of their defensiveness exposes how threatened they feel internally. A person who truly feels emotionally unaffected usually does not react with extreme manipulation when confronted. But narcissists often react strongly because exposure threatens the identity they depend on. This does not necessarily mean every narcissist consciously plans every manipulative behavior in detail. Many reactions happen automatically through deeply ingrained defense mechanisms. But emotional awareness still exists on some level. They understand when admiration disappears. They understand when control weakens. They understand when their image becomes threatened. And their reactions reveal this repeatedly. This is why arguing with a narcissist often feels emotionally impossible. You are trying to reach honesty, mutual understanding, and emotional accountability while they are psychologically focused on protecting identity. Those are two completely different emotional goals. One person wants resolution, the other wants ego survival. And because of that difference, conversations often spiral into emotional exhaustion instead of clarity. The victim keeps trying to explain facts while the narcissist keeps trying to protect self-image. Logic stops mattering because the emotional threat underneath the conversation becomes stronger than the truth itself. And many victims spend years believing that if they could only explain things better, stay calmer, use the right words, or prove enough evidence, the narcissist would finally understand. But the issue was never lack of understanding alone. The issue was emotional resistance to accountability itself. That realization changes the way people see narcissistic behavior forever, because it explains why so many conversations leave victims feeling unheard, drained, and psychologically destabilized, even when the truth was obvious from the beginning. So no, the most disturbing part was never just the lie itself. It was the transformation that happened after the truth came out. The sudden denial, the emotional manipulation, the way calm conversations turned into confusion, guilt, and psychological exhaustion. Because when healthy people feel guilty, they usually reflect. They think about the damage they caused. They feel empathy. They want to repair the pain. But narcissists often react very differently. Guilt becomes a threat to the image they desperately protect, and instead of self-reflection, many of them choose defense, control, blame, and emotional warfare. That is why the moment a narcissist gets exposed can feel so shocking to witness. The mask weakens. The carefully created image starts cracking, and for the first time you begin seeing the person underneath the performance, the coldness, the manipulation, the desperation to avoid accountability at any cost. And many people spend years trying to understand why these interactions felt so emotionally draining without realizing they were trapped inside psychological tactics designed to distort reality itself. But once you recognize these patterns, something powerful starts happening. You stop blaming yourself for their reactions. You stop over-explaining your pain to people committed to misunderstanding it. And slowly you begin trusting your own mind again. That is why understanding narcissistic behavior matters so much, because awareness protects people from losing themselves inside emotional confusion they were never meant to carry alone. And if this video felt deeply personal, it's because countless people silently go through these exact experiences every single day while believing nobody else would understand. But you are not imagining the manipulation. You are not weak for feeling emotionally exhausted. And you are definitely not alone in what you experienced. If you want more deep psychological insights about narcissism, human behavior, manipulation, emotional healing, and the hidden patterns most people never talk about, subscribe to The Silent Empath and become part of a community that sees beyond the surface. Like this video if it opened your eyes in any way, and share it with someone who keeps questioning themselves after every painful conversation, because sometimes the right knowledge arrives at the exact moment someone needs it most. And the next video may reveal another truth that completely changes the way you see people forever.